Lesson 2 is on designing the presentation. We want to create a compelling story that keeps everyone together as we move from point to point to point, slide to slide to slide. And the end point is persuade them at the end so that at the end, the story is so clear that it gets them to say yes to the ask. Here's the game planner. And now remember here that these are contents of what you'll need as the bits and pieces, your raw material for your presentation. But you should feel free when you're conveying the message to your audience to switch the order around to tell the best story given the quality and thoroughness you have in the research or how compelling different pieces are, right? We want to put them together in a way that leads to our objective, not just some form that we might have. A couple of things about the audience. If your audience is internal, for example, if we're talking about quality control, we would consider using a slow build where we say, here are the hypotheses that we're testing, and here's the analytical setup on how we did it and the results of what we saw, and then describe in more detail what is the level of confidence we have in the results, go item by item because this group is a thorough, detail-oriented group, and the areas where your hypothesis was refuted or not confirmed even. Then what are the unexplained results that may require more testing and recommendations if you're ready to do so, and make those recommendations and describe the next steps, right? So this would be a meeting, a bit of a status report perhaps, where you're doing a slow build, logical, building one point upon the other. I'm going to contrast that with a management discussion or an investor discussion where you want to cut to the chase, right? Cut to the chase is because movies have chase scenes and you want to cut to the chase. Let's get on with it. Let's have the car chase through the cities of Paris, right? Let's cut to the chase. So in the management, high level management and investor, we want to start with providing what are we looking for, answer first, what we often discuss, and we would then have answers then with results that came from the testing or whatever we used to develop the test plan and the test results, and then backup if time is available for more information. So you start with answer first, then show the results of the work, the data that supports it, and then in the backup would be all this other stuff about your planning, your hypotheses, your design, your questionnaire. All that is important for you to get to where you are, but not important for management or investors to see what you've done. Here is an example how the same bit of work could be presented in completely different ways depending on the audience. And I hope you see that would be true for many of the instances you'll find in business. Here's a brief description of design of a presentation. These are not meant, again, to necessarily be sequential and only one way. It could be iterative. You could have logical flow before mind maps. So this is just steps or techniques that will lead to good results. And we'd go through each one in turn in case you're unfamiliar with this field. And if you're familiar with it, bear with me. If you're unfamiliar, this is a brief description, and you might want to look into it because all three of these are powerful and they work. First is a mind map. The idea is quickly lay out your thoughts, and you have a blank piece of paper and you stick something in the middle of what you're trying to do, and you're starting to branch. Big branches are major groups that you're talking about, and then sub branches are things that amplify or further detail what you put in the main branch. And the idea here is we might start with a center, and this would be your business. And then 2 is use words and pictures. You can feel free to draw things out in sketching. And what are the key words? Don't write long sentences just because these are phrases or words that give the idea of what you're talking about in that branch. And step 3 is start tying associations to the main branch and sometime between branches. 4th is how would we link those in terms of different aspects of what you're describing. And we could use color schemes to show commonality of a industry or a target or a thought. And finally, the final structure looks like a gangly tree. Now, notice that there's no necessary order to what we're doing. So mind maps are meant to quickly lay out things in different categories and allows you to then put it out there so that you can then draw them together. So it's essentially letting your different sides of your brain work at different times. One is the creative side, laying it out. Another part might be analytical, providing more detail, and there's more integrative and synthesis for pulling it together in a story, right? So we're exercising the muscles in our brain. The logic flow is, okay, you've got all these pieces. Now let's create a sequence where you could tell the story so that it is a logical sequence to get to a conclusion. And this would probably jump around on those branches. So here we're pulling together in order to get to a way to convince others. So the first is gathering information. Now we're creating a flow that has an objective. The final step is create a storyboard. Storyboards are used a lot in developing feature-length cartoons or developing an ad campaign or an advertisement. And this is just creating a sequence of imagery and messaging such that it brings everyone together. You tell a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's why we have a storyboard. And we used to, when we were at Bain & Company, we used to carry in our briefcases sheets of paper with little squares. And everybody had these things. And there were, I don't know, 15, 20 squares on this piece of paper. And they're meant for you to just sketch out very quickly little pictures or key words for you to start developing your storyboard. In time, you would have these things maybe on sticky notes and move the sticky notes around. But the idea of a storyboard, it tells a sequence in words and pictures and graphs so that you start creating the visual elements of what will make your story come to life. So storyboarding using a sticky example is you might have major topics, you kind of put them in some order, and you recognize these as elements of what we're putting for the ridiculously short executive summary. And then we'll arrange them into an order of the key aspects in a logical sequence. Here's the pain, here's the market, here are segments, and here's our advantage, right? Kind of the key aspects of why someone should care about your solution. And then you might have graphics that will make the point to show the market size today, show the segmentation. What are the profiles of those segments? Who are they? How do they behave? How much do they spend? And then start building out your slides. So it might start with a blank sheet of paper, like I was describing, with a bunch of boxes, leading to sketches by hand. Then you see those little red circle numbers. That might be the order of the flow of the presentation, leading to ultimately formalized graphs that show word slides and graphical elements to tell the story to the audience. We have other organizing approaches. We could use an outliner. You could do something in Microsoft Word or other programs that allow you to just do an outline form and then break out detail below them. This is a logical way to do a lot of things we do in writing, or in this case, in presentation design. The other aspect that's very useful in PowerPoint is we normally look at the slide view and almost never get out of the slide view, because on the left side, we see just the little thumbnails of our slides. But there's another choice called outline. And what the outline does is a very important tool, and it probably spot errors, frankly, if you use this tool. You click the outline choice, and it gives just the titles of each slide. And the thought is the titles of the slides themselves should tell the whole story, because the contents of the slide just describe what the title is getting at anyway. So we'll get a lot more into slide design, so I don't want to get ahead of myself right now, but this is just another tip, is that if you're developing a presentation in PowerPoint, that rather than the slide view, go to outline view, and you'll see the flow of the titles that matches your outline of your data and your storyboard. Here are some other tips as we go. No commas. Now, what do we mean by no commas? It means that don't go on and on and on and on when you have a simple message to dilute that message into a complicated one. For example, we develop marketing strategies, media programs, implementation plans, and performance metrics. Wow, that's a lot of words. Aren't you just a marketing expert? Or aren't you a marketing company that delivers results? You know, use succinct, powerful words instead of buzzword after buzzword. Next is watch out for marketing speak. We are the premier service provider for template-based web presence solutions for customers who place priorities on price and ease of use. This is an actual one from Wix, and this is just way too much marketing speak. Try to keep it simple so you won't turn off the audience. Keep it nice and clear. The other thing is identify one objective of your presentation. Now, you may have multiple, and that's fine, but if you had one thing, what would that one thing be? And then at the end, don't forget the ask, right? So if you're in your mind, you say, I'd really love to meet with them in their offices where we can really talk to them, or maybe show our product and bring a prototype to them. Don't forget to have that in your presentation. Don't forget the ask. Like, we would love to show you the prototype. It's pretty big to bring into this bar. Can we set up a time next week where we can show you the prototype so you can see how it looks, a little bit of its functionality, and you can see if this is something you think there's a potential for? That's a very different thing. Don't forget the ask. You'd be surprised. People do. The other thing that AC has, and I'll speak on behalf here, is that he hates it where the last thing you say in your presentation is thank you. Now, I'm not saying we should be impolite and not grateful, but you should thank them, but you should also make sure you have the ask. It would be something like, thank you much for your time and attention. I know you're very busy, and we'd like to see if this is of interest so that we could meet perhaps next Thursday at 10, something like that. So you can thank them, but just don't let that be the last thing. You want to get to an ask so you can pause, listen for a reaction and answer, hopefully one in the affirmative.